নমস্কাৰ, সুপ্ৰভাত। পোনপ্ৰথমে মই 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ তৰফৰ পৰা আজিৰ ভাৰ্চুৱেল মঞ্চত উপস্থিত থকা সকলো ছাত্ৰ-ছাত্ৰী আৰু অতিথিবৃন্দলৈ আন্তৰিক অভিবাদন জনাইছোঁ। আজি আমাৰ মাজত আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানটোৰ বক্তা ডক্টৰ উদ্দীপনা গোস্বামী উপস্থিত আছেহি। তেখেতৰ বিষয়ে এটা সৰুকৈ চমু পৰিচয় আপোনালোকৰ আগত দাঙি ধৰিব খুজিছোঁ। ডক্টৰ উদ্দীপনা গোস্বামী 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ কোৰ টিমৰে এগৰাকী সদস্যা। তেখেতে বৰ্তমানে জনছ হপকিন্স ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত অধ্যাপনা কৰি আছে। তেখেতে এগৰাকী অতি প্ৰতিষ্ঠিত লেখিকা আৰু তেখেতে অসমতে কটন কলেজৰ পৰা হায়াৰ ছেকেণ্ডেৰী পঢ়িছিল। তাৰপিছত তেখেতে দিল্লী ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত BA আৰু MA শেষ কৰি জৱাহৰলাল নেহৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিৰ পৰা PhD কৰিছিল আৰু তেখেতে ইণ্ডিয়ান ইনষ্টিটিউট অফ মাছ কমিউনিকেশ্যনৰ পৰাও জাৰ্নেলিজিমত তেখেতে প্ৰশিক্ষণ লৈছিল আৰু PhD কৰাৰ পাছত তেখেতে ভাৰতৰ কেইবাটাও আগশাৰীৰ প্ৰতিষ্ঠান যেনে তেহেলকা আৰু ইণ্টাৰনেশ্যনেল প্ৰতিষ্ঠান যেনে নেশ্যনেল জিঅ'গ্ৰাফিকত সাংবাদিকতা কৰিছিল আৰু তেখেতে গুৱাহাটী মহাবিদ্যালয়তো অলপ দিন অধ্যাপনা কৰিছিল। পাছত তেখেতে 2016 চনত ফুলব্ৰাইট স্কলাৰশ্বিপ লৈ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি অফ পেনচিলভেনিয়াত পোষ্ট ডক্টৰেট কৰাৰ সুবিধা পাই তেখেত USA লৈ আহিছিল আৰু তেখেতে ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি অফ পেনচিলভেনিয়াত অলপ দিন অধ্যাপনাও কৰিছিল আৰু তাৰ পাছত এতিয়া তেখেতে মই যেনেকৈ কৈছোঁ যে তেখেতে এতিয়া জনছ হপকিন্স ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত অধ্যাপনা কৰি আছে। তেখেতে কেইবাখনো গ্ৰন্থ ইতিমধ্যে লিখি প্ৰকাশ কৰিছে। মই আপোনালোকক জনাব খুজিছোঁ। এইকেইখন গ্ৰন্থ মই দেখাই দিছোঁ। তেখেতৰ প্ৰকাশিত গ্ৰন্থ। তেখেতৰ এই ৱেবছাইটটোত আপোনালোকে তেখেতৰ বিষয়ে সবিশেষ জানিব পাৰিব আৰু এইকেইখন তেখেতৰ প্ৰকাশিত গ্ৰন্থ নাম হৈছে এখন গ্ৰীণ টিন ট্ৰাংক, No Ghosts in the City, Conflicts and Reconciliation, The Politics of Ethnicity in Assam, Where We Come From, Where We Go, Tales from the Seven Sisters, এইকেইখন তেখেতৰ প্ৰকাশিত গ্ৰন্থ। আৰু আজি তেখেতে এটা অতি গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ বিষয়ৰ ওপৰত আলোকপাত কৰিব। আশা কৰোঁ আপোনালোক সকলোৱে বা ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকল বিশেষকৈ এই অনুষ্ঠানটোৰ পৰা উপকৃত হ'ব। বিশেষ নকৈ মই উদ্দীপনা গোস্বামীলৈ পাৰ কৰি দিব খুজিছোঁ আৰু মই ৰিকুৱেষ্ট কৰিছোঁ যে আমাৰ সদস্য মিফতাহুৰ ৰহমানে আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানটোৰ টেকনিকেল ডিটেইলছৰ বিষয়ে দুআষাৰ সকলোকে কৈ দিব। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you, Rifatka. Technical details ক'বলৈ গ'লে বিশেষ নাই। আমি বেসিক্যালি জুমৰ প্লেটফৰ্ম আৰু ফেচবুক আৰু ইউটিউব তিনিটা মিডিয়ামত লাইভ আছো। সো ৰিকুৱেষ্ট কৰিম জুম সকলক যে নিজৰ অডিঅ'টো অফ কৰি ৰাখিব যাতে ইকো নিচিনা প্ৰব্লেম নহয় আৰু যোনকেইজন আমি প্ৰেজেণ্ট কৰি থকা নাইকিয়া নিজৰ ভিডিঅ'টো অফ কৰি ৰাখিব পাৰোঁ। কিবা বেণ্ডউইথৰ ক্ৰাঞ্চ আহি যায় সেইকেইটাৰ পৰা বাচি থাকিলে আমাৰ ছেশ্যনটো ধুনীয়াকৈ চলি যাব। আপোনালোকৰ কুৱেশ্যনছ থাকিব পাৰে। কুৱেশ্যন সুধিবলৈ কাৰণে আমি এনেকৈ ৰেডি কৰি ৰাখিছোঁ। যোনসকল ফেচবুক আৰু ইউটিউবত লগ ইন কৰিছে নিজৰ কুৱেশ্যন সুধিবলৈ কাৰণে তাতে চেট বক্সত আপোনালোকৰ কুৱেশ্যনছখিনি পুট আপ কৰি দিব। আমাৰ মডাৰেটৰ্ছ থাকিব, তেওঁলোকে সেই কুৱেশ্যনছখিনি লৈ আহি পেলাই ইয়াতে উদ্দীপনা বাক সুধিব আৰু আপোনালোকৰ এনচাৰ্ছখিনি তাতে আমি দিয়াই দিম। আৰু যোনসকল জুমত লগ ইন কৰিছে আমি এনকাৰেজ কৰিম যে আপোনালোকে নিজে কুৱেশ্যনটো সুধিব পাৰে। সো ৰেজ হেণ্ড বাটনটো যদি আপুনি ক্লিক কৰে আপোনালৈ আমি দিম কুৱেশ্যনটো পাছ কৰিম আৰু আপুনি সুধিব পাৰিব। ইয়াতে মঞ্চতে আপুনি সুধিব পাৰিব আপোনাৰ ভইচ দি পেলাই। আৰু যদি আপোনাৰ কেতিয়াবা মাইকৰ প্ৰব্লেম থাকে, যদি দিগদাৰী হয়, তেতিয়াহ'লে আপুনি চেট বক্সত লিখি দিব, আমাৰ মডাৰেটাৰে কুৱেশ্যনটো সুধি পেলাই এনচাৰটো লৈ ল'ব। বাছ সিমানে। উদ্দীপনা বা আপুনি ষ্টাৰ্ট কৰিব পাৰে। থেংক ইউ।
ধন্যবাদ মিফতাহুৰ। আৰু ৰিফাত ধন্যবাদ সেই পৰিচয়টোৰ বাবে। I want to start by saying that ইয়াৰ পিছত I will be talking in English, but please feel free to ask any questions or seek any clarifications in Assamese. So the reason I am speaking in English is because I think most clearly in English. And as I will show you as we go on, how we think in our minds is very crucial to how we express ourselves through words, whether it is in speech or in writing. So if Ohomia or any other language is what you think you are most comfortable in, then please use it. A language is just a language. It is not a sign of prestige or privilege, but we'll get into all that a little later. So for now, I want to pick up where I left off in my short video introduction to this talk. If you have not had a chance to watch it yet, you can go to the website of 15-Minute Hikka and take a look at it. It's a short 10-minute video. Basically, it tells you why we need to learn about writing, especially critical writing. So I ended the video by talking about the need for writing instruction at all levels of education, and especially in research and in higher education. Because our students and our scholars, they often find themselves feeling insecure about their writing abilities. And this happens particularly when they have to present their ideas in writing to a wider audience, which is beyond their classroom, which is not their professors or their research supervisors. So if you are a student, let's say, who wants to apply to study overseas, or a scholar who wants to write a paper for an international peer-reviewed journal, or really anybody who wants to write for the general public, you have to understand critical writing. To apply to any university in the US, just to take an example, you will have to write a compelling essay, right? A cover letter that tells the university why they should take you in or why they should give you a scholarship. They get hundreds and thousands of applications each year. So most of the students who apply are bright, they are smart, they would have scored very high marks. So how do you stand out? How do you stand out through this one piece of writing? Call it the cover letter or the personal statement, whatever it might be called, depending on the institution. So this is what will help you stand out, but how do you write it? That's the question. Now, let's take another scenario. Say you are a research scholar and you need to publish a paper in a peer-reviewed journal. You have done intensive research, your findings are amazing, they are groundbreaking, but you don't know how to write them. You have always envied your literature major classmates, whether they are English or Ohomia literature majors, because you thought they could always write better than you. You feel like you are more of a facts and figures kind of person, a person of ideas, not of words. And so you struggle with your writing. Perhaps you take help from your professor or your supervisor, or maybe you seek out professional help, like you approach a professional editor. I don't know if people do that here in India, but I do know for a fact that this is done very commonly in the US. So you do all these things to get your paper written and published. Or maybe you just work very hard at your paper. You slog through it for hours on end, you write it yourself in the end, and you even publish it. But you never really think of yourself as a writer. After all, you think that if you were a writer, it should not have been such a difficult task for you to write it, right? So that's scenario number 2. Now let's look at a third scenario. Let's say finally that you are a writer, okay? You are or you were a literature student. You are maybe also a creative writer. And you feel that you know the language that you write in very well, but you also feel that there is something lacking. maybe you are getting too many rejections from publishers, right? Or maybe you're not getting enough reader response when you do get published. Or it could just be that you don't feel or you don't think that your writing stands out. You want to be exceptional and you want to speak to your reader in a way that really touches them and makes them get inside your head and feel a kind of intimacy with you. Believe me, that is every writer's deepest desire, okay? To be able to connect to their reader in a unique way and to stand out from the rest of the crowd. And when I say this, I do not just mean creative writers. This dream is shared by academics and scholarly writers as well. So as a scholarly writer, you have a hypothesis and you spend an entire paper or book or a dissertation trying to convince your reader of that hypothesis. If you can convince your reader, if you can persuade them to believe in your argument and to engage with your argument, to maybe cite you in their next paper or make a big deal of your finding or your argument, wouldn't you consider yourself the greatest writer ever? I know I would, but we don't often get to feel that way, do we? So what really is the problem here? The problem I've realized is that we think writing is about the language. If we know the language well, we can write. That's what we think. It's like saying, I know everything there is to know about how a car functions. I know the mechanics of a car, so I'm a good driver. But knowing how a car works, knowing what it is made of, and so on and so forth, will contribute towards making you a good driver, yes, but driving also needs more than that, no? It needs fine motor skills, it needs adaptability to different road conditions, and it needs familiarity with the rules of driving. Similarly, there are rules to writing, and if we know these rules, I can guarantee you will be able to adapt to different writing situations. Meaning you can write across disciplines, you can write in any genre that you need to write in. So critical writing instruction is about unpacking these rules of writing, whether it is writing in the pure sciences or applied sciences, whether it is writing in the humanities or social sciences, and even in literary or creative writing. You may be writing an academic paper or an opinion article or a personal essay or a short story or a novel. You will need to understand these rules and you will need to apply them to your writing in order to be an effective writer. So critical writing instruction will help you craft your writing more clearly and more convincingly, and in a way that will help you connect with your reader and be able to convince them or make them take notice. So before we proceed, I just want to add a few words of caution here. I'm talking about the craft here, okay? The art and the creativity. Now, that's something entirely different. And that is not something that we can be taught. And that is what actually sets apart a great writer from an effective communicator, okay? Writing instruction will definitely make you a good craftsperson, like driving instruction will make you a good driver. you will have to bring your own creativity and your own inventiveness to your writing, as you will bring your own creativity to your driving. So every driver has their quirks in how they respond to the roads and to the other vehicles in the roads and to the drivers of those other vehicles. Similarly, every writer has a different way of relating to their audience. So how do you use the same rules of the craft, but innovate on them to make your reader see things differently? What are the innovations that you bring to the language and to the writing to make your reader really sit up and take notice? How does your idea stand apart from the ideas of other writers? How do you make it do that, right? Stand apart. So all of this is individual, and it cannot really be taught. But at least if you know the rules, I think you are more than halfway there. So as a writing instructor, I have led many students and writers down this path, this more than halfway path. So if you were wondering what qualifies me to talk to you about learning how to write, well, that's what I do for a living. I taught critical writing at the University of Pennsylvania for 2 years before moving to Johns Hopkins University, where I teach, now I teach writing and research intensive liberal arts courses. So at Hopkins, I've taught music students and some pre-med students how to write critically. At Penn, though, I taught, let's see, I taught pre-meds, nursing students, engineering students, science and mathematics students, social science students, literature students. I could go on and on. Basically, anybody who comes to Penn has to take the critical writing course. So students across the disciplines take these writing courses. And additionally, I also tutored PhD scholars across disciplines, and I also tutored performance artists. They have to write grant applications, they have to write program notes and things like that, right? So I also work with researchers writing policy documents, client reports. Again, the list just goes on and on. Now, the reason that I am even mentioning these lists here is because I want you to understand that the rules of writing are the same for everyone. We just need to apply them to our own particular writing situation. And that is what critical writing instruction teaches us. So often we do not know the rules, but we use them anyway. So if I was to go back to the example of the research scholar who is struggling to write the paper, but who writes it anyway, right? And maybe even gets it accepted and published and discussed, and the whole process. It just goes to show that we all know how to write. We just don't think of ourselves as writers, and we don't reflect on our process of writing. So we do not know the rules that we are actually following. We are already unconsciously following them, but we do not know that we are following them, and we do not know what these rules are. And honestly, I wasn't aware of these rules either till I started reflecting on my own writing. So how is it that some of my writings got so much engagement from readers all over the world, and some just connected with readers in Assam or just within India? What was I doing differently with each piece of writing? Or why was it that an academic paper on a particular topic the same topic, was not getting accepted in an Australian publication, but it found acceptance in the UK journal, right? So did the academics in these two places have a different way of engaging with ideas, the same idea, but different ways of engagement, right? And was there any difference in the way in which I had to present the same idea to readers in different parts of the world? So I will not go into my history of writing here, but just to mention that after writing and publishing in several genres, in creative writing, in journalistic writing, academic writing, and also writing about writing itself, I have finally understood the importance of following certain rules. I'm sure many of us, especially the young ones, the students, do not like the idea of having to follow rules, but well, there they are. I had a poet in one of my classes at Penn, amazingly powerful writer at a very young age. And he shared his poetry collection with me when he realized that I was also a poet. And he hated coming to my class. He said he hated rules. Poetry is not about following rules, it's about breaking the rules, right? And critical writing was all about rules. And like I said, he hated rules. So I told him what I tell all my students. You are young, you have the power and the privilege of breaking rules, and you should do it. But if you did not know what the rules were in the first place, how would you break them? Right? Rebellion is about changing things. It's about rewriting the rules. But if you did not know what you are fighting against, you are a rebel without a cause, and you do not make a difference. And if your rebellion does not make a difference, if it does not bring about change and innovation and new creative thoughts and processes, society is doomed. We are doomed, right? So he began to see things differently after that. And he also realized that poetry writing also has its own set of rules, and critically thinking about those rules is also a part of the process of creative writing. And really, writing is all about critical thinking. So I promised you when I started the talk that I will take you back to discussing our thinking process and how it determines the kind of writer that we are. So here it is. Critical writing is about questioning the existing rules and challenging the status quo. Critical thinking is the same, right? So we think about the rules. We want to find out for ourselves whether they are worth following, and we question them, and we either follow them or we challenge the status quo. When you do not accept a set of given rules, but you think for yourself, and you either accept or reject those rules based on your own critical evaluation of them, your writing process has already begun. So let's say your professor has given you a certain question to answer, or you have a certain argument to prove in a research paper, or you want to express your opinion in a social media post on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Your pre-writing process has already begun the moment you start thinking about the question, or you start thinking about the hypothesis, or you start thinking about the events that you want to express an opinion about on Facebook, right? You will look at the question or hypothesis or event from different angles. You will weigh the arguments for and against, and you will decide on your message. You will decide on what you're going to write about it. So you will start reflecting on how you will place your argument or opinion, right? So you will start thinking about the language you will use. You will think about the rhetorical devices you will apply, or maybe even the way you will organize your argument or opinion. And that's it. This is the process. It's all happening in your mind, right? So this reflection, it's taking place in your mind, and without really thinking about it, you are deciding how you will adjust the message to the medium and the intended audience. So if you're writing a tweet, you will use a certain number of characters. And because your audience is on the internet, you will use the acronyms or word contractions that are familiar to this audience on the internet, right? The language of the web. But if you are writing an answer for your class, for your professor, and you use those same contractions or the same casual language, it is not going to get you good grades, trust me. But then I didn't have to tell you this. You already knew that, right? But maybe you never really thought about it until now. If you thought about it, that's great. But if you didn't, then this is what critical writing instruction does, right? The aim of critical writing instruction is to make these implicit rules, which we follow anyway, which we follow without even knowing about them. So the aim of critical writing instruction is to make these implicit rules explicit, so that you can apply these rules. You can learn or think reflectively about these rules and use them in your writing process, no matter what your writing situation is. And like I already said, these rules are universally applicable across genres and across disciplines. What you need to do is just transfer your knowledge of these rules from one writing situation to another. And that's it. That's what makes you an effective writer, okay? So you will notice, however, that I have not said much about language, about grammar, syntax, and so on. That is because in writing, clarity of thought is the most important. If you know what you are writing about and how you're going to write about it, the language just follows. So I tell my students, clarity of thought really shows in clarity of writing. Let's say you know the English dictionary inside out. Okay, you know the language very well, but that does not mean that you will be a good writer if you do not know how to make an organic argument, right? All the pieces fitting together, right? That's what I mean by an organic argument. Or if the main idea in your piece of writing, whatever it is that you're writing, if the main idea is not clear in your own mind, it shows in your writing and it gets communicated to your reader, okay? Now, alternately, if you have an argument, if you have a central idea in place, a clear idea, the language will come to you. Of course, I'm not saying here that you do not have to work on the language, right? Or that if you have command over a language, it does not help your writing process. It does. It most definitely does. But what I am saying is that it is possible to acquire the language, right? It is possible to acquire the language through critical reading. So critical reading is something that I also teach my students, especially non-native English speakers, but we'll not go into that right now, or we will be digressing. But I just want to say that language is not the main concern, or should not be the main concern in your writing. What I'm saying is that your thought, your critical thought, that is the main concern in writing. Grammar, syntax, and all the other mechanics of language, these are lower order concerns. And this is the key to good and effective writing. Knowing what you're going to write and why you're going to write it, right? And for whom you're going to write it and how. Everything else will just follow. So understand this formula and you can write anything. I spend entire semesters teaching this formula to my students. So for the most part, the reason that so many of our students and research scholars do not get published in international journals is because the writing that we are taught, but wait, we are not taught how to write, am I right? We are only taught the subject. We are taught English, we are taught science, we are taught maths, and we are expected to know how to write in it or about it, right? We learn, for the most part, we learn how to write on our own. And because we struggle along the way, we very often lose our confidence in our ability to express our own minds and our own thinking. So I can assure you there is no dearth of deep and critical thinking among our students and our researchers. Our minds, our ideas, our thoughts, and the experiences and the scholarship that shape these thoughts, these ideas, are not any less valid or valuable than that of somebody sitting in, say, the University of Pennsylvania or Johns Hopkins University. I say these names because I'm familiar with people there, right? So why can't we write like them and publish in the places that they publish? It's because our educational institutions do not prioritize writing instruction. So my son has been taught how to write since the first grade in the US, right? But what about students here? So students elsewhere have an advantage over our students in Assam, and it is imperative, it is essential that writing as a discipline should be incorporated into the curriculum of our educational institutions, at least in higher education, if not in the schools as well. So a few private universities have started this in India, but it has to happen in the public institutions also, so that every student has access to it. And additionally, the teachers need to be trained in writing instruction before they teach the students. Introducing creative writing in colleges like they did recently, I think last year, it does not help if the teachers themselves are not qualified to teach students how to write. Just because some of the teachers are also writers, right? We have some amazing writers in our colleges in Assam, right? But it does not automatically qualify them to be writing instructors. And you know, it has to be institutionalized. But till it is institutionalized, what should our students and young scholars do? So what I can say is that you should start reflecting more on your writing process, begin with yourself, right? Think about why you are writing what you are writing. Who are you writing it for? And how can you most effectively tailor your message to your audience? There are a lot of free resources which are available on the internet these days, which you can access. I'm happy to help if you reach out to me. I always, anyway, I coach writers privately, apart from teaching at the university, teaching the students there. And I have designed many courses for those who want to learn how to write. And there are so many of these courses, and excellent ones, which are available. And I would encourage you to seek them out. And but please make sure that you are taking courses that are reliable, right? And they are from qualified instructors. Again, I am very happy to help you, guide you. If you need help, just reach out. And I think this is where I will stop talking now, and you can start talking. I'll answer your questions.
Nilkamal, do you see some questions there? Can you ask them to Uddipana, please?
Yeah, Udipanaba, I have we have one question here. So there are websites to practice grammar. That is one of our members who is asking. There are websites to practice grammar. Is there any link where we can practice writing? As you mentioned also that there are links, or there are ways we can practice our writing. The most important thing is that we want to practice and check if we are communicating effectively. Udipanaba, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So I think you're referring to Grammarly, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a website where you can check your grammar and also your sentence structure and things like that. But I must point out that even if it's a great resource, it's an amazing resource, it's used by people everywhere. But I would still strongly encourage you to exercise caution, because it's still a machine, right? So despite all the advancement in machine learning and AI and whatever else, we still need to be careful about the apps and stuff that we are using. And that's one. And secondly, about referring to your question about the writing apps that are available. There are a few which will help you, which writers use regularly, which will help you structure your writing, gives you sort of a book map. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share, I have a list somewhere, so I'm happy to share that list. And again, that is something that we can use for guidance, but I would not recommend leaving it to the machines. Like I said, finally, it's your own creativity, your own innovation. But again, also, like I said earlier, it does help you get halfway there, right? So there are these tools that writers use to create book maps or thought maps and mind maps. It's the same as science students probably use. So it's like I said, a formula. So you will get apps. You can find apps that will give you that formula.
Hello. Good morning, Uddipanaba. Very nice talk. And
Thank
we have some questions from Zoom also. So this is from 15-minute only. Why you have used the word critical writing? What is the difference between critical writing and creative writing?
Okay. So, well, writing is writing. And, like I said, there is critical thinking in creative writing, and you need creativity in critical writing as well. But the distinction that I made, and this is a distinction that is made in the discipline of writing, is because creative writing has follows a different kind of reasoning. So in critical writing, you will mostly follow kind of a justificatory or an explanatory reasoning, but there is narrative logic and there is narrative reasoning in creative writing as well. Besides, like I said, it's more of an art, right, than a craft. You can be taught the craft of creative writing as well as that of critical writing, but it's creative writing calls for more artistry in that sense. So there is this distinction between the two, but there are overlaps as well.
Okay, Nilav Bhattacharya, are you here, Nilav?
Yes, sir.
Can you please speak out your question, please, to ma'am? It will be better if you ask yourself, please.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you that will there be any provisions that I can join in the courses that you devised?
Yeah, so I have not really taught them in India yet. I teach writers, I coach writers and teach students in the US, but I'm happy to talk to you about it. You can maybe just email me. I'll share my email in the chat box. So if you want, we can talk about it on email. Does that help?
Sure, ma'am.
Or is anything available online that you teach?
There are a few talks which are available online, which I have given on writing, so I can share that with you. There is this piece that I wrote on writing to overcome trauma and looking at the different steps in writing, right, which correlates to the life skills that you learn as you are writing. So I can share that as well. In fact, I think that link is available on the website that Rifat shared at the beginning of the session. So they should be available there, but I can share the links to my talks in the chat box. Yeah, I can share them. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you. There's another. Yeah, please.
No. So Dipana, can we share your email in the chat box, that your Gmail?
Yeah, I think so. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the second part of the previous question was, what is the mantra of good writing? Is it a flowery language or simple words that everyone understands? Is it long sentences versus short sentences? What is your advice to the students or wannabe writers?
I don't know if there is a mantra to good writing, but yes, like I said, there is a formula which we all follow, which we all need to follow to be effective writers. And the first rule of effective writing is clarity. And clarity comes from simplicity. So this is something that I tell my students in class every time. And they initially they don't believe me. So being basic is something that is looked down upon, right? But I tell them that if you want to be good writers, go basic. Use basic language. Use think simple. It's very easy to think complicated thoughts because that's how we are conditioned. But if you can if you can break down your complex thought into simple ideas, that is what really gets across to your reader. right? If you use flowery language, as you say, it depends, right? If you're writing for a particular audience that is used to flowery language or that expects that kind of language, right? By all means, that is what you will use. So the other part of this formula of simplicity is to know who you are talking to, who you are communicating with, who is your audience, right? If you are writing in a particular genre, let's say you're writing a novel, some amount of flowery language. I'm not very comfortable with that term, but we'll use it because that's what is used in the question. So some amount of flowery language or literary flair, right, needs to be there because you're communicating with an audience which expects that kind of language there, right, or that kind of thought process. But if you're writing an academic paper, you will not use that kind of language. You will use the jargon of that particular audience. So again, within academic writing, if you're writing for a group of, say, nuclear scientists, you will not use the same language, the same jargon, or the same diction that you will be using for, let's say, social scientists, right? So we need to be very careful who we are communicating with and how we are communicating with them. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Thank you. One question from Bovis Hazarika. To what extent we can rely on Grammarly software in writing academic articles?
Yeah, like I said once earlier, it's very helpful. My students do use it, and I know lots of writers who use it, but at the end of the day, it's a machine, and machines make mistakes. So it's the same thing as using, like one of those citation apps, right? You go online, you have a website which gives you the citation, it gives you the particular, the citation in a particular style. So if you want APA, it'll give you APA. If you want MLA, it'll give you MLA. Very easy, use it. It's going to cut your work in half, and that's the kind of work that you do not want to waste your time on, like putting your sources in a particular, style. It just takes away a lot of time from your writing and research process. So use it, but always double check and know the style that you are using and cross check. This is what I tell my students. So human intelligence, right? Same goes with using Grammarly and all the other apps that are available online.
Okay. And just, is it free or it has to be subscribed, this software?
The Grammarly software?
Yeah, just a question.
I think it's free. I've never used it myself. So I believe it's free. Maybe there are some paid features. Yeah, so I'm not very sure.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from Zoom and YouTube and Facebook?
Not anymore from here. You've already asked, but I have one question here, Dipanaba. So when it comes to writing a poem, okay, is there any websites or something, any ways to check whether it is, up to the mark or whether it is good or how it would be? Because poetry is usually like, it is an inner calling, you can say, or it is something that comes to our mind and like not following rules, but it's just our expressions, our thinking. So how can we find out like whatever we are writing is up to the mark? And plus there is something called modern poetry. So would you throw some light on that?
Okay, so like you said, poetry is about self-expression, right? And again, this takes me back to my student that I was talking about earlier. So it is about self-expression. It is about bending the rules or breaking the rules, but there are always some rules, right? So you will have to, if you are writing a particular, in a particular genre of poetry or subgenre of poetry, like you said, you mentioned modern poetry. So if you're writing for a modern audience, it's a different kind of poetry, right? Different kind of language, different kind of expression. So again, depending on your audience, you will modify the kind of language you're using, the kind of imagery that you are using, and how you are using the imagery. So these are the rules that I'm talking about. It's not about if you're writing, let's say, free verse, you have to write it this way. No, if you're writing free verse, then you have to know, again, who the audience is for that particular poem, right? So if you're writing for, let's say, a journal in the US, you will not write about experiences that only people in Ahom can relate to. Right? You will write about something that people internationally, universally can relate to. So things like that. These are the rules that you need to follow. And secondly, about gauging, about making sure that you are reaching across that. Sorry, what was the exact word that you used?
Up to the mark, or
okay. There is no mark. Okay, there isn't really a mark. It's all about just writing what you want to write, and then one part of the writing process, which I have not had the time to talk about here, but which I have talked about in another piece that I mentioned earlier in response to one of the questions, the different steps in the writing process. So one of the very, very important steps in the post-writing process, after you have written it, right, is to check in with your peers. So writing is community building. It's about being part of a community of writers, of editors, publishers. So that is how you assess your writing, if that's the right word. I'm not very comfortable using it, but you always check in with your peers. So in my classroom, I always get my students to do peer reviews, right? And then you learn from each other. So you will be talking to other poets. You will be sharing your poetry with other poets, and they will give you feedback. Does it resonate with them, right? That's the first step. Second step, you will send it to an editor who will possibly accept it or reject it, as the case may be. Then you know that it's okay. It's not right for this particular publication. Let me send it somewhere else. So this is how you gauge. As you gauge the I won't call it the merit, but the acceptance of a piece by checking in with the community.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question comes from Drishti, daughter of Sangamitraba. I'm a freshman in high school in the US. Can you tell me what genre of writing will be most useful to me?
Hi, Drishti. Okay, so tough question, because I think all genres of writing are useful. But since you are looking at, since you're in high school and probably looking at going into college, I would strongly urge you to look at writing, critical writing, and think about or maybe you've already done that, and I'm sure your school would have already helped you with that, prepared you for that, to write your college essay, right? That's the most important piece of writing that you're going to do in your life so far. So yeah, I would say concentrate on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next question comes from Sankalpa. Sankalpa, are you here? Sankalpa, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you please speak up? I mean, your question is good. He's asking about US education. So there was some, as 15-minute Hikha posted a link that there was some particularly US based education system last time, but he says he has a particular question regarding English writing. So can you ask yourself, please?
So I wanted to know what is the I wanted to know about the US essays, entrance exam essays.
Okay. So, like I was telling Drishti, that is going to be the most important piece of writing that you would have done in your life so far, because it will determine where you're going in your future. So yes, work on it. There are so many of these. I was mentioning some freely available resources earlier. So there are quite a few of them, and I can share them with you. Maybe we can do this through the website, Nilkamal, Rifat, and everybody else. I'm talking to the team now. So we can, I can upload or send certain links to freely available resources which the students can use to work on their essay. Do you think that's possible?
Yes, yes, I think so. We plan to have a resources tab in our website.
Okay.
Putting all these things.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we should work on that because it's going to help the students. And since I have access to these resources, and I will keep updating as they come to me. So there are some really amazing writer friends who have created these videos. There are some YouTube videos, for instance, or there are some courses that come up once in a while, and I would be happy to share those resources with you.
Yeah, thank you. That will be really helpful for the audience. Nilav has an interesting question. Nilav, can you please ask yourself, please?
Sure, sir. This is a little off topic, ma'am. Though I wanted to know that presently I'm studying at class 12 and I want to apply at the University of Buenos Aires. So are the essays or any other provisions similar to that of the US colleges or universities, or is it quite different?
Nilab, I'm very happy that you are going to the University of Buenos Aires. I want to go there too, but I'm sorry, I have no idea about the the admission process there. I am not the right person to answer this, but I would encourage you to look up their website, see what they need. And yeah, and this is another thing that I want to point out to all the students who are preparing to write their essay, their college essay, or their cover letter, or whatever it's called in your institution. What you need to do before you even start writing your essay is research. Okay, research is a very important part of the process of writing. It starts with analyzing the genre. Okay, you look up some samples of cover letters that people have written earlier. Okay? Approach students who have seniors who have already gone there, or gone to universities in the US. Read what they have written, how they have written it, dissect it. Okay, so just look at every word, look at how they've structured it, look at everything, and then research the institution. So if you're, if you are going to the University of Buenos Aires, for instance, look up their website, see what they are, what their principles are, what their vision is, what they're looking for in their students, what are their strengths, right? And where is it that you can contribute? So take your time, do your research. That is the pre-writing process, and then get into your writing, okay? So yeah, this is for, I think, all three, Drishti, Sankalpa, and Neela.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question that came from our team member only. Many of our students might be hesitant because of vocabulary. What is your advice to students how to develop a good vocabulary from early stage as a young student?
Critical reading. Yes, I mentioned that, but I did not go into it. So it's just like it's not possible to write whatever you're writing for everybody. So if you're writing, let's say, a college essay, it's only for your college, admission office, right? If you're writing a memoir, it will be for a certain audience, or a novel, it will be for a literary kind of audience. If you're writing a poem, it will be for people who read poetry. So that is what I feel that when you are, sorry, the question was about vocabulary, right? So yes, I just lost my my thread of thought there. Anyway, so you have to read the genre critically, and you have to look. So let's say you're writing a research paper. Even if you know the English dictionary inside out, it's not going to help you, because you have to know the vocabulary, the diction that is used in your particular discipline, right? So you have to read other authors in that particular genre. So again, genre analysis, right? You analyze the genre that you're writing in. You look at the structure, you look at everything, yes, but you also look at the language. You go into the language, you see how they, for instance, what kind of signal phrases are they using? So how are they citing particular sources? What is the kind of jargon that they're using? Jargon is not a bad word. It's a bad word if it's used too much, but you need to use it if you have to get across to your audience. So read critically, look at examples in that particular field, in that particular discipline. And that's how you, you enrich your vocabulary and your diction.
Thank you. I mean, more questions will be on the way, but I had a question like very general. I mean, here we learn mostly the British English, probably because the entire education system has been derived from British. Now you are say teaching in US. So do you find a lot of differences between British English and American English? Or is that a question? I don't know. Yeah.
No, of course, that's a valid question. And yes, there are differences, right? And there will be differences. You go to Australia or you write for an Australian journal, you will be expected to write in Australian English. So it's, and again, that is where the genre analysis comes in. That is where you read critically. So you take examples of, you pick up samples of writing from scholars in that journal. So if you're submitting to a particular journal, it's always, you will see in the submission guidelines usually of all the journals that you are encouraged to read the back issues of that journal. That's the reason, because they want you to know who they are, what kind of language they entertain, or what kind of structure they have, etc., etc. So that is what we need to do. We always need to do our research. We need to look back at at writings from other people in that field. Again, that's being part of the community that I was talking about, the writer community. Or being a writer is being part of that community. And you adjust your message, your language accordingly. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So we have one more question from Sangamitra. What specific should we look for in the structure of essays and books to improve our writing?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, you're asking about what kind of structure we should give our writing?
Yeah, Sangamitra Bra, can you please clarify?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Ruthie. No, I mean, like when you read something like in the paper or in a book, what sort of things should we look for in order to improve our writing?
How do we read critically?
Yeah.
In other words, yeah. So two ways. We look at the content and we look at the structure, right? We look at how, or maybe I should use the word architecture. That's the word I usually use. So what is the architecture of the thinking that has gone into that particular piece of writing, right? So if you want to write a personal essay, I always tell my students to go look up the best in that field and to read through it and to look at how that particular writer has structured their thought, right? How they have structured their thought, and that is the structure that will reflect in the writing. And you also look at the content. What are they writing about? How are they writing about it? And the language, right? You go into the content, you go into the language, and then you look at the overall structure, the architecture of thought. So these are certain things that I think help us become more effective readers. And that makes us effective thinkers.
So in connection with Drishti's question, I have a question for you. So this is Rifat. So for a young writer, for example, who wants to be a writer in future, and they want to develop a practice of writing through reading. So what do you advise, that should they read non-fiction or fiction? Is there a difference between reading these two different types of writing, or anything is fine?
I would say read everything. So the best piece of advice I got in my life, which I really believe launched me into this, path of writing, was from somebody I was very fortunate to know since a very early age. I'm sure many of you have heard his name, Prafulla Datta Goswami. So he was my childhood mentor, and everything, the way I think, the way I read, what I do, I think the foundation was laid by him. And he gave me a piece of advice once, and I still remember it. He said, read everything. I'm sorry. Okay. So he said, read everything that you can lay your hands on from. So he gave me my first world history book. He also gave me my first Mills and Boons. He said, read even the packaging that comes with, the newspaper wrapping. So read everythth. And that's what I've done. And I think it's by reading other people that you shape your thoughts, and that translates into your writing. So reading is what makes you a writer. You don't just become a writer by writing.
So in a way, you mean to say that to be a writer, one has to be a voracious reader. Is that true?
I don't know about being a voracious reader, but definitely a critical reader. Definitely a very effective reader, a discerning reader, I should say. So even if you don't read like 3 books at the same time, it's fine. If you read 1 book in a week, but if you read it well, that helps.
Okay.
I had a question. Who is your most favorite writer?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't really have a favorite, but if I had to choose, I would say Vishnu Rabha, because of what he thought and how his thought translated in his language and his writing. So it's not just about what he wrote, but how he wrote it, the way he used the Okhomia language. That totally reflected his philosophy of ethnic harmony in Okhom. And since I, as a researcher, my work is about ethnic reconciliation and about peace, I really relate to his writing. So yeah, if I had to choose, I would choose him.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's
Ishita,
an interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, please,
Nilkumar,
please.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nilkumar.
Ishita has a question. Ishita, are you here? Can you please speak?
I'm speaking from my my mother's phone because the light just went. My question is that, is it okay to write in British English for US college application?
No. So the first rule of writing is know your audience, right? I have talked about that. So if you are writing an application for a UK university, by all means use British English, but if you're writing for a US university, and I know the Americans are very particular about that. So use their language. So as a writer, your first responsibility is to your reader. And your reader in this case will be the university. And this is an American university. So, you know, just do what they want. And if you want to, you know, get across to them. So.
Thank you.
About that, sorry, like that, about Ishita's question, that why she is asking, I think that question is that maybe for a student who is in India, it might sometimes be difficult for a student to know, like, you know, while writing a sentence, that what is a British sentence or British word versus an English word. Suppose we are, like, you know, for example, in India, just a small example, we are used to writing COLOUR as color. But if it is like, you know, in US, so it is COLOR. So do you have any resources that you want to suggest for students, how they can, like, you know, get some ideas about writing in different formats, like American English, for example?
This is where, once again, I will say they need to look up earlier samples, right? Look up the writings of other people, research, homework, a lot of research and homework. Like this is the, and I repeat myself, this is the most important piece of writing that you're going to do in a long, long time. So you have to do your homework. You have to put in a lot of effort. You are not familiar with the language, familiarize yourself, right? This is what your university will also be looking for. They want you to work hard to get there, right? They want to know that you really, really want to go there. And it will show in what you write and how you write, okay? So if they see that you have not made the effort, they will, that's already going to go against you, right? So you need to look up resources for to familiarize yourself with American English. And it's very easy. Just, you know, read American publications, right? Look at the language. Look at the language that they use, okay? And that's it. It's very easy to familiarize yourself with American English because there's more of it than anything else out there. So just go on the internet, do your research, learn the language, write it.
So maybe they can even read American news portals like CNN
Yes.
and all, so that they can
Yes.
familiarize themselves.
Definitely. There are so many of these, you know, news outlets. They can read American journals, literary publications, all of that. Even books, right? There are so many books by American authors, and they're available. They might be available in your school libraries. So just look them up. And don't look at it as you know, hard work or a chore that you have to do. You can even read for pleasure. Just pick up an American novel, read it, have fun while reading it, and also as you are having fun, just look at the language and analyze it and use it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next question is from Drishti. Drishti, can you please speak?
All right, so my question is, does annotating help when practicing critical reading, and what's the best way to do it?
Yes. Annotating what you're reading, right? That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the first step to critical writing actually is critical reading, okay? Annotating is one of the ways in which you can critically read. There's this whole, hang on, let me just put it in the chat. You can just do a Google search and yeah, this is called the Marcy test. It's the Okay, give me a second there. I will look it up myself and give you the link because it's called the Metacognitive Awareness of Reading Strategies. I give this to, oops, hang on. Okay. I share this with my students every semester, and I ask them to go through it and see what are the, it gives, it's a whole inventory of critical reading skills. If you are using any of them already, that's great. If you're not, you can try to apply as many of them as possible. It's not necessary that you use all of them or any of them. I mean, you know, this is just a list for your reference. So this is a good way to start reading critically, and your critical reading will reflect in your critical thought, and that will reflect in your writing, and you know, you're a writer.
Thank you.
I have no more questions in Zoom. Anything in other platforms, Tamanna?
I have a question for you. I was thinking about it that I think in today's world, maybe the young students have a unique situation about writing, because with the use of social media, like we are always encouraged and we are so used to writing short sentences which has no grammar, or like, you know, I mean, something which has to be very short, be it in Instagram, be it in Twitter or whatever. So in that situation, so like, what is your advice to young students, how they can actually, like, because they are not used to writing long sentences much, to be honest. What I feel is that maybe like that comes as a barrier for many of them when they think of writing their college essays, because most of the time they are used to writing something very short and not long paragraphs. And even the exams nowadays are multiple choice questions, especially in science discipline. Most of the questions are multiple choices, right? So then when they have to write essays, and I mean, maybe that's a real problem that they might be facing actually. So do you have any suggestion for them?
My advice to all the students and writers that I coach always is to use as few words as possible. So in fact, I love Twitter because it forces you to put your thoughts into you know, as few words as needed. So if you can say something in 10 words, why use 100? And if you have to use 100 words to express something that you can say in 10 words, it just shows that your thought process is not clear, right? So I think in some ways, of course, there are many ways in which social media is, you know, harmful to today's teens and, you know, whatever, the mental health of kids and so many other things. But it has definitely forced them to say what they want to say in as few words as possible. And that is the best skill a writer can have. And about essays. So let's say you have to write an essay, and there's a word limit, right? 2,000 words. And you just cannot come up with 2,000 words because you've already said what you want to say in 200 words. It just means that you haven't thought enough, right? So if you have expressed what you wanted to say in 200 words, the rest of the 1,800 words should also be meaningful, and they should all go into arguing for or establishing what you said in those 200 words, right? You have to be able to succinctly put your thoughts into words, but you also have to be able to stand up to your argument, right? You also have to be able to establish your argument, and that is how you fill those 200 other 1,800 words. You do not use you know, extra words to fill them up. You fill them up with your thoughts, you fill them up with your arguments, you fill them up with you know, valid rhetoric. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that should be useful. So in a way, you mean that maybe that writing short for social media posts are actually helpful
Yes.
in gathering the thoughts together in few words, right?
Many ways, yes.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And actually, I was listening to your answer to Neil Kamal when you answered to his question that who is your most influential writer. So your answer was Vishnu Rabha. So I am intrigued by this answer because what I understand is that your writings are mostly in English, and to my knowledge, so I get that Vishnu Rava's writings. So how like across different languages, so how that helps you to write in English?
You mean the kind of language that I use to
So have
express?
you read like Vishnu Rava's writings in English that helped you, or what do you mean?
No, I meant his writings in Assamese, of course, and the way he uses language. So it's not the language itself, it's not Assamese that he wrote in or the English that I write in, but in how he used the language, how he shaped the language. So he would use words from, let's say, the Boro language, right, in the Assamese, in writing his Assamese pieces. And that in itself is a very political move because it shows that he is talking about the ethnic oneness of all the communities in Ahom. And similarly, if I am writing in English and I introduce an Assamese word in it, right? I am changing the language. I am making that language mine. I am, making it more Assamese. So language, we can go into this discussion on and on. I will talk to you offline about this. But what I want to say here is that language is just a medium. And it's the writer who is, using it, manipulating it, expressing their politics through it. And that's what I meant about Vishnu Rabha's language as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, sorry, Nilkamal, go ahead.
No, thank you, Rifada, for those questions. Nilav has one more question. Nilav, can you please come speak again?
Yes, ma'am. The thing is that I can read and write Spanish quite well, but when it comes to talking, I really get scared. Like, speaking and public speaking, and also how do I overcome this fear?
If you can write and read well, that is excellent. Start thinking in Spanish. Okay, start thinking in it and practice talking. So when I was teaching in what I used to do, I used to offer the spoken and communicative English course. And most of my students, of course, were the ones who came there, wanted to work on their spoken English. So one advice I gave them, and I'm giving you the same, stand in front of the mirror and talk to yourself. So just do that. Or talk to your smartphone. If you don't have anybody to speak to, that is face-to-face, right? So if you can speak to somebody face-to-face, do that. But if you don't have somebody to do that with, stand in front of the mirror or record yourself on your cell phone. And that's how you practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it. And use your thoughts, okay?
So I have a question for you, Nilav. Like you asked this very like interesting question about speaking Spanish. So do you understand Spanish or you can just read and write?
I do quite understand some, but I can read and write the most fluently.
Right. Okay. Got it. Because I think sometimes there is a very this is a very tricky situation. It's not an answer like what I'm trying to give is that I have one experience myself that growing up, I learned Arabic as a language. So I learned to read it well. I could read it, and I think I can read it even now, and I can write it, but I would admit that I don't understand it at all. Except a few words of it, I don't understand it. So I can read like a parrot, but or maybe write it if somebody shows me something, because I know how to form those words, but I cannot understand anything. Maybe I mean, I don't know. Maybe those kind of situations are sometimes real. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this, Udipana?
No, I think what you said was very valid, and that's very interesting that you bring that up. Yeah, we do that a lot, I think, with many languages, new languages that we pick up. So I don't know, I haven't really thought much about that, but just off the top of my head, I would say watching movies in that language would help. Right, we have all these resources, we should use them. So I'm watching a lot of French serials on Netflix these days, and I understand French. I can read it, I can't speak it, but because French and English are so close, and I mean, whatever language. So the more you hear others saying it, the easier it gets for you to understand it and also speak it. So watch Spanish shows.
So Udipanaba, I have one question you can say, or request you can say. So would you like to recommend any community or any website or anything like that, like a community based, wherein we can join and read others' poems or other writings, like novels or anything. Novels we get online, but when it comes to poem, we are always reluctant to buy the poems, right? So the books on poems, sometimes it's like that. So how would we is there any way to come in our community or something website in a web portal where we can you would like to suggest us?
There are a lot of writers groups and reading circles. I don't know if where are you based, Tamanna?
I'm based in Bangalore, but I'm in Assam, so right now in Assam.
Okay. There are writing communities everywhere, really, but I don't know how, because I've been out of touch a little over the past few years, so I don't know about the situation in Assam now, but whenever I'm here, I just try to get together with other writers, and we have like a reading circle, or it has to come from you. If you don't find it anywhere, go create your own community, find other writers, get together, create a reading group. So in the US, I used to be part of a couple of these groups, and we used to meet occasionally, and we would critique each other's work and give each other feedback. And that's the best kind of feedback that you can get from other writers, from your peers, right? So that's one way to go about it. There are all these writers associations. I don't know how active they are, but if they are active, please join them. There are many online forums these days, so you can join them. So there are, I'm sure there are a lot of Facebook groups that you can find, right? But of course, depends on, whether they are active or what kind of people are there, how selective they are, and things like that. So do a few searches online, I think, and we can also talk offline, and
okay.
I'll see what resources I can share with you.
That's perfect.
Yeah, poets.org. I see that, Drishti. Thanks. That's a good website if you want to read very good poets and get inspired.
One question, Udipana, Miftahur this side. When we talk about English education in India, for students in class 5 and 6, it's like grammar and comprehension. We never go for giving them that education about critical reading or something like that. Is there any resource that we can give to these kids so that they can develop their reading style?
You mean school children?
Yeah, basically because I'm a father to a class 5 student, so that's a question. That's a question that coming out of my mind.
There are a lot of resources online, but then again, you need to know which ones are reliable, right? So we can again talk offline, and I can share some resources with you. Yeah, I understand. It's very unfortunate that our kids in India are not taught how to read and write, right? It's a very important skill. So just to give you an example, when my son was in kindergarten in the US, they were taught to read people, right? So because they couldn't yet read books as such. So reading is reading. Whether you're reading words or you're reading people or you're reading emotions, it's the same process, right? That's happening in your brain. So they start them off that young, and our kids are really way behind. And yeah, I wish I could, intervene and help create this whole institutionalized way of helping kids, but it's not happening anytime soon. We all know that. So yeah, but I'm happy to share some resources with you about reading and writing for younger kids.
Okay, I'll connect with you. Thank you.
Udhiban, about just one curiosity question out here. So you always mentioned that it is always a target audience that we look into when we're writing something, a poem or a book, right? So we have seen authors like Paulo Coelho or any other authors whose target audience may not have been India, of course, all right, or any other country, but their country itself. But yet they got famous, and yet their work is like appreciated by all over the world. So is it like not just the people whom we are targeting? It also the matter is like the fact is the topic that we're choosing or the words we're choosing, or is there anything like you want to throw light on this?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So as a writer, we always have an audience in mind, right? So if you are writing a commissioned piece, for instance, then you have your editor or your publisher in mind. If you're writing a poem, you already have a kind of audience in mind who would read it, although maybe you're not conscious about it, right? So if you're writing a poem about flowers, you'll have you would think that people who read about nature would be appreciative of your poems, right? But if you're writing about political violence, let's say, like I do, right? So you would not expect people who don't know about the political violence in a form to read your poetry. So there's always an implicit or implied audience in your mind when you start writing. And if you can get across to that audience, you are a good writer, right? So if you have been able to get engagement from your reader, if you have been able to connect with them, you are a good writer. But somebody like, somebody like you mentioned, these great writers who have crossed boundaries, who are internationally loved and read, they are the great writers. So that is what I mean by saying there's the craft and there's the art. It's your art that makes you universal, that gives universal appeal to your writing and connects with readers at all levels. So it's a bonus if you can connect with everybody, but your main task as a writer is to have a primary audience in mind and just write for them.
Thank you, Dipnaba. That answers my question.
Can I add one last question, Udipana?
Sure.
Actually, few days back, Sanghamitra shared one write-up in, I think, New York Times with me. So there they have, I think the write-up was about writing in the midst of crisis or writing in the midst of stress. For example, like writing as a stress buster. So that's what the title was about. For example, like COVID is putting a lot of stress on everybody's mind and people are staying home and with a lot of stress. So then that piece was suggesting that, oh, like writing is a stress buster. Just to relieve your stress, start writing. And just, you don't have to pick anything, just write a few words or like, I mean, whatever is in your mind, try to write it down. Maybe like expand something. And one day if you don't have anything to write, just even say that, oh, I don't have anything to write today. So do you have any thoughts on it, that how writing can help somebody to like, relieve stress or things like that?
So I think I mentioned this in passing, but there was this piece that I wrote last year on healing through writing and how we can, how the process of writing can help us, not just what we are writing, but how the process of writing can help us overcome anxiety, stress, trauma, and so on and so forth. So I can share it here. And then when that was published, I was approached by this podcaster who wanted to talk to me about that piece of writing because he is a clinical psychologist. And he said he uses the same or a very similar approach in his own interactions with his patients when he treats them for anxiety and trauma and so on. So I'm just sharing the podcast link here on the chat and the link to the website as well for anybody who's interested. So, and that is what that is what's so great about writing. It's therapy, but different kind of writing is therapeutic in different ways. So there's expressive writing, which many clinical psychiatrists and psychologists use, which is just about taking everything you have that's bothering you and putting it on paper and just getting it out of your system, right? So that helps some people. For other people, if you structure the way you structure your thoughts and the way you deal with your trauma through your writing, that helps in a different way. So there are all these different approaches to writing and healing through writing. And I think that's why I write, because that's good for survival.
It's really good to know, Udipana, and thanks for sharing those articles and the podcast. So I think definitely many of today's audience would love to read them. Thank you.
Thanks. Sanghamitra, thank you for sharing that link. I'm going to read it very soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody has any more questions from the audience, please? The floor is open. Anything from Facebook and YouTube, Tamanna? Nothing, right? That
Nothing.
were unanswered.
Only we have appreciation from Ashfaq Haq and Kalyan Gogoi. Kalyan Raidongya. So they're appreciating your work and they're appreciating your session here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we can pass on to Sanghamitra for the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Udipana. Azire Toptogodhur Bhaktitatur Karne Ami 15 minute Shikkar Torphor Pra
অশেষ ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো আৰু লগতে সকলো ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰী আৰু শিক্ষক শিক্ষয়িত্ৰী যিসকলে এই অনুষ্ঠানত উপস্থিত থাকি যি সহায় সহযোগিতা আগবঢ়ালে তেখেতসকললৈ 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ তৰফৰ পৰা আমি আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো উদ্দীপনা 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ এজন সক্ৰিয় সদস্য সো যদি আপোনালোকৰ ভৱিষ্যতে এই বিষয়ত কোনো প্ৰশ্ন থাকে 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ ইমেইলৰ জৰিয়তে যোগাযোগ কৰি তেখেতৰ পৰা প্ৰশ্ন সুধি উত্তৰ পাব পাৰে আৰু এইখিনিতে মই আমাৰ নেক্সট সেশনৰ তাৰিখটো আৰু বক্তাজনৰ কথা ক'ব খুজিছো আমাৰ নেক্সট সেশনটো হ'ব 21 আগষ্টত টাইমটো একে সময়তে নহব পাৰে আমি এনাউন্স কৰিম আৰু এই নেক্সট সেশনটো বক্তাজন হৈছে আমাৰ সকলোৰে সুপৰিচিত মোৰো এটা সপোন আছে এই গ্ৰন্থখনৰ লেখক ডক্টৰ ৰুবুল মাউত বৰ্তমান হাৰ্ভাৰ্ড ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত ৰিসাৰ্চ ফেলো হিচাপে কৰ্মৰত আৰু তেওঁ এই বক্তৃতাৰ বিষয়বস্তু হ'ব মডাৰ্ন সায়েন্স এণ্ড ইন্টাৰেক্টিভ সেশন আমি আশা কৰো আপোনালোকে এই অনুষ্ঠানত সহাৰি জনাব আৰু এক্টিভলি অংশগ্ৰহণ কৰি এই অনুষ্ঠান সফল কৰি তুলিব ধন্যবাদ
ধন্যবাদ উদ্দীপনা ধন্যবাদ সকলোকে
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's a very nice lecture, Uddipana. Thank you. We learned a lot.
Thank you, Uddipana. It was really nice.
Thank you, Uddipana. Very nice.